You've worked for so many large companies, Microsoft, IBM, Citrix, AWS, startups. How did you get that opportunity?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think.
All right, welcome again, everybody, to another episode of Sympa Says. Today, I've got with me great human, old friend of mine, old work colleague, TJ. Let's get into your career. So I'm going to take you back to when you were a kid. Or when you were a teenager. When was the first time you can remember you thought to yourself, hey, this is what I want to do for a living? This is a career I want to get into. It doesn't have to be what you ended up doing, but when was the first time you thought about your career, or you took it seriously in some way?
That's a very good question. Yeah, I mean, it's also has a very sentimental value to me. So I was born and brought up in a defense family, which means my dad was in Indian Air Force. He was not a pilot, but he was a aeronautical engineer. And certainly, I was going to the best of the schools. Saw the life very closely of a fighter jet pilot. My dad was the aeronautical engineer for a aeroplane called Canberra. Nothing to do with Canberra as a capital. It's one of the heavy bombers, which he was engineer. So I was influenced by the culture and what Air Force had to offer. There's a lot of that feeling you have for the country, that you have to serve for the country. I saw my dad doing it, and certainly my biggest takeaway from that was like, I want to do this myself, and I want to be a pilot in the Indian Air Force. But then I want to kind of fly the fastest, sort of air jets in the Indian Air Force. So that was basically what my
Okay.
my goal was in my entire life when I was a kid.
So is that essentially almost from the moment you can remember to a certain point? Yeah.
So I think I was sure by the time I was in ninth grade that I want to be so. And by the time I got into my high school, my 12th grade, which is the final year of schooling, I actually sat for an exam called the National Defense Academy, and I cracked the exam. I think I had a 308 rank. Uh, and if you don't get the higher rank, you don't get
Mm.
called for in Indian Air Force to be selected or to be even tested for the skills of a pilot or even for the officer-like qualities. So you can imagine, like my entire schooling, my high schooling was all about this, growing up with the dream to become a pilot in the Indian Air Force.
So give me an understanding. So if you ranked 318, is that like what number would you have to get to then get tested to be a pilot? Because I know there's a lot of people in India,
Oh, I see.
obviously, but I assume that it has to be super high potentially to get to that level,
Yeah.
or is it?
Yeah, it's just the test, right? So I think the
Yeah.
written test is where I scored the rank, and then what happens after that is you get called by the Services Selection Board. They call it the SSB, depending on which specific board you will be part of. And I was actually called for an interview with the SSB board number one, which is in Dehradun in Air Force. So basically, you spend like 3 to 4 days. You go through a lot of different tests, like cognitive capabilities to your pilot skills. Basically, they give you tons of different type of games to play, which is very complex, and they need very quick reactions. So literally like millisecond reaction to everything that you have to kind of quickly, make decisions on. So they test you on those skills. They test you on your skills to how you work and collaborate with your colleagues. How can you solve a task not just by yourself but bringing and collaborating with others? And they test you on those skills because when you are in defense or in the Indian Air Force or the Army, it's not about just yourself, but also to keep your own friends and your colleagues safe, right? So they test for those qualities, and then end of it all, they actually give you a result. Whether you qualified or did not qualify, were you correct on your medical terms in terms of whether your body was functioning in the right way? Because if you're looking for
Okay.
a pilot in any place, especially in the defense, you need to have a
Mm.
like picture perfect body. So you can't
Okay.
have deformities. So they select all that, and then after all of this rigorous selection, they tell you whether you're going to make it, you're not going to make it, and then basically from there the journey starts or ends.
Okay. Okay. Fair enough. So was there something else that occurred a little bit later in schooling before you decided that?
Yeah, interesting. So, well, if you're aiming to become a pilot in the Indian Air Force, they still expect you to have mathematical background or mathematics or a science background. It's good to have so that you are good with a lot of the tools and things that
Mm.
is inside the aeroplane. So, my background in the high school was science, biology, physics, chemistry, and mathematics, which eventually also qualified me to kind of even take up a sort of a exam or take up a course in engineering, or I could have even become a doctor. So once the whole thing didn't work out the way I was expecting in the Indian Air Force, and my next thing, which at least I could think about, was to go and look for an engineering role, which I was passionate about equally because my dad was one. And I at least felt if I couldn't be the pilot, my second best option is to definitely go and do computer science engineering, for which I sat for an exam. I scored a decent rank, and I went to Bangalore for my engineering. And I did a 4 years of full end-to-end engineering, computer science engineering course. And yeah, so while doing so, I got more interested in data and analytics. Databases, I would say, was like the key for me. Like I read a lot of books. But yeah, so kind of that's where it started. And then certainly I got campus placed to Microsoft. I went even deeper into everything that they had to teach, like Exchange to, Windows Service to Active Directory to whatnot. But then I think they also taught a lot more of SQL Server. And that's how I landed up being a SQL Server engineer back in Bangalore. And that's how the journey started on the data side.
Okay. And yes, and for those listening, Tara was one of the people I used to harass to try and improve all the SQL databases that I used to have to try and improve when I was a Premier Field Engineer with client management, and helped a lot. So I certainly appreciate that. Now, just correct me if I'm wrong. The first role I see on LinkedIn was actually indeed with Microsoft. Was
Yeah,
that the first sequel or first full? I guess what we'd say real job, first full
exactly.
time job, right? Okay, so that was that like an internship that you got, and it looks like it was. I think from memory, you did that role in India, didn't you?
Correct. Yes. So you're
Okay.
right. So basically, the way it worked was Microsoft would actually hire you like 6 months ahead of time from campus.
Okay.
So you would then land up working for Microsoft while also trying to finish your final few months of engineering. In that time frame, they test you in different ways and they make sure that you are the right person. So they offer you both a job and a paid job, literally, but also give you the option to select where you want to be. And then they actually take a final examination, which is like, okay, you're good. You're here already at Microsoft, but which stream or vertical or product you're going to actually go and pick and work on? And that happens like literally after your engineering is finished, you just kind of go through that exam with them one more time. It's like an interview between different teams. And then all the 6 months of different, technology that we learned, I felt I was more connected to the databases SQL Server. So I picked SQL Server. And, they had to take an interview. They felt, yes, I'm there. And then they gave me a full, like, hands-on experience on
Hmm.
SQL Server. So I was like looking into solving some of the most complex problems of the enterprise customers across the world of Microsoft,
Yeah,
precisely.
I'm pretty. I always say, for anyone who starts at a company, any large company like Microsoft, did you find that I've talked to a couple of people who started at Microsoft in various internship type programs. Did you find it intimidating coming into a large company like that? And if so, and this is more for anyone listening who potentially has that opportunity, how did you deal with that, or did you feel fairly confident based on some of the experience that you had that you were able to take on some of that work?
Yeah, no, I think Microsoft gives you a ton of great trainings. There's some the top experts sitting around. I think George, you do yourself so much of training, and people like you who make every concept seem very easy. I think there are a lot of people like you at Microsoft who would train you, explain, and they know that we're coming out of college, so we have the fundamentals behind us, but then we don't have the on the job or in product experience. So they spend a lot of time. We go through ton of rigorous trainings. Everybody's around to help. And, kind of it's a process. So, it's not intimidating because there's everybody going through the same similar sort of process to learn. But also there are so many learning tools. There's so much time they give you to kind of go learn so that you are the best in the business. Because now when you're talking to customers or helping them out, you're actually solving the problem in the best way possible and learning at the same time. So I think that way it's good. And also, Microsoft does give you, like when we got hired or I got hired, I was part of something called as the Microsoft Academy for College Hires. It's a very special program. A lot of, I don't know if it's still there or not. In our time, it was there. It was one of the best programs I would say
Mm.
we had. And within the college hire program, I was part of Service Academy, which is basically focusing on the service delivery to customer, and eventually solving their complex problems. So yeah, I mean, I would say it just Microsoft makes it so easy when you first join in. It's very welcoming, deep dive, hands-on experience that you get on the product. And I would still say even today, whatever I have learned and how deeper I have been into the product and the learnings that I've had, some like working with some of the top customers and people at Microsoft, I think I still carry that with me. And I still feel that there's some part of me which is kind of, if I'm doing anything good today, is because of those learnings.
Good start to your career. So after that, so you were there for just over 4 years, then went to IBM for a year and a bit. Was that, so just correct me if I'm wrong, because I think if I remember, and mate, you've worked with so many large companies, it's actually quite cool. So you've almost, if there was a version of bingo, you might win, mate. You've like Microsoft, IBM, Citrix, I think AWS, a bunch of these other startups as well.
Yeah.
So you were at IBM for just over a year. Again, it looks like database analytics, and then again you went to Citrix for another year in Bangalore.
Yeah.
Do you feel they were more like what was your thought process at that point? Is like I've been at Microsoft, I need to experience being in another company, or was it I need more challenges in the data and analytics space at that point with both those
Yeah,
companies?
no, spot on. I think for me, the way at least my career has been, and sometimes you don't have to like, for people listening, and they don't have to take it like examples from specifically my career because I've also moved on passionately to do something new. I've tested myself, I've challenged myself. I know in the industry you may want to be in a company for longer, but I think had this massive zeal for learning, and I want to try new things, and I think that's kind of what got me to IBM. Uh, Microsoft was great, no questions, but then IBM had the specific thing to learn beyond, like doing more consulting based projects. These are very
Got it.
different type of projects where you kind of have accounts and then you're dedicated to it, you're writing code, you're doing a lot of the technical validations, going deeper, using some of the same products that I did. So I was still doing SQL Server, but also had access to, Boxy, business objects, crystal reports, mainframes. So, you're now learning beyond Windows servers and others. So I think that was the key to go to IBM. But again, virtualization and Zen desktops and Zen apps became so big, cloud became bigger. And then I was like, okay, I had an opportunity from Citrix, so I went there. But again, having said that, I want to kind of continue with Citrix for long, maybe. But then Microsoft Australia happened, and
Something
I want to
happened.
go. I want to
Something
go meet
happened.
George and work with him.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because, yeah, and just on that, I think to your point, it actually makes a good point about people's careers. The time frame when you were at Citrix that's when virtualization was almost at its peak,
Yeah,
right? Really, it really was before cloud started really kicking
correct.
in a few years later. I remember my first week at Microsoft. The first meeting I went into, I think you'd just been hired, and someone mentioned you. So actually, I think from the moment I started at Microsoft, I essentially knew you because you were mentioned in that first meeting, and then I met you a couple of months later when you came down. So take me through that. Did you just get a call from somebody who knew you from Microsoft and said, "Hey, come down. We've got this awesome role in Australia." Let me give you a second part to that question because that's a big move, right?
Yes,
You're going to move from where you've grown up, where
yeah.
you were born in India, right? Like you're a native expatriate Indian. Big move to say, hey, I'm going to move to another country. And so, what was your, so first of all, first part of the question, how did you get that opportunity to come back? And then what was your thought process about moving countries in the first place and how you were going to handle that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think I always wanted to go and embrace a different part of the world. Now I'm in the US. I don't mind tomorrow if there's an opportunity that pops out and I have to go somewhere else and do something exciting. I would do that. So that part was easy. But I think the interesting part was certainly I moved to Citrix. I totally loved Citrix, a great company, wonderful people. The things that I was working on was excellent. But then again, certainly sometimes you have Godfather and some people really bet on you. So people who did bet on me when I was joining Microsoft for the first time out of college, such leaders actually became beyond the leaders within India, right? So they became like leaders for the entire APAC. So, thankfully, I have had such amazing leaders who grew me when I was in Bangalore. And then when opportunity like this came up to become a PFE in Australia and work like face to face with customers, I think why not take that opportunity, learn about a new culture, a new place, take new challenges. That actually makes you more resilient and very strong. Your background becomes extremely, I would say, that more multifaceted because now you're working with very different type of people, different type of problems. You get to meet even more smarter people who are out there in Australia doing different things. So, working, let's say, with you, George, or with Roger, or with, Namki, I see
Raj.
the names, right? Or, Balaji. It's always something new, right, that you were learning. So I think these things only can happen if you give yourself that opportunity. So yeah, once this came up, certainly both IBM and Citrix was a tech lead role. So I had a small team. I was grooming people, but then PFE was more of an individual contributor. But nothing to beat the fact that you get to do real stuff with customers, run risk assessments, build architectures, give them the recommendation that'll make their life easier and literally keep the customers loyal and pretty much happy about what they see in the product. So yeah, so that's how Australia happened, and glad it happened because there's so much I think I learned in Australia too.
I assume that was like a joint decision as well to move to a different country with your family, right? I always say my wife's the boss. Nothing happens unless she
Oh yeah,
says yes.
100%. 100%. My wife, I think, I definitely have to give it to her for the fact that
Yeah,
she was like, yes, if you want to go, great. I mean, she is always around. She's like, yeah, let's go have, see the part of the world that makes you happy. She loves traveling too, so it was good in that way. But the fact is that you still need that support. To your point,
yeah,
George, to
definitely.
be aligned.
Yeah, definitely. So you were at Microsoft for a while. You were in Microsoft Australia for a while. Moved into the when this little thing called Azure started occurring. We had this really cool CEO named Satya Nadella came in, and you were one of two people who kicked off the Azure Ranger program, which I think can clearly say aligns with your goals about learning and growing. I remember, like, because to give some context to the listeners, I took over the role from yourself. And there's lots of questions here as well, because I know this is the point where there was a reason why I only found that afterwards. The reason why I took over from TJ was because he was going to move to the US. He didn't tell me at that point. But I remember when we were going to, and I've been waiting to ask you this question. I remember distinctly when we were going to do an Azure Ranger Day. And for those listening, an Azure Ranger Day was when it was like discovery days. Like you talked about everything you can imagine that was Azure. Running those days were a little bit more, let's hope the demo works today moment. But I remember you turned up, and I remember you were suited up. I remember this distinctly because as PFEs, we'd be, you dressed okay, but no one really wore a suit. And TJ was wearing this suit, and he looked schmick. And I said, TJ, looking good, mate. I remember you said something to me like, I can't remember exactly what you said. Something like, George, someone told me that you should always dress for the role that your next role, something like that. I remember that distinctly. It was actually quite cool. I just wanted to say that story because you were on, because I still remember that today. I thought that's actually a good way to think. It's like living what you want to become. It's like showing the impression of this is what I want to be. Really cool.
Sure.
So take me through. I'm assuming that the Azure Ranger work was just a continuation of that learning. You really wanted that opportunity to really grow outside of data space and do that. When did the thought or the opportunity come up for you to move to the US? In which case, I can't remember what your first role. It was to do with marketing, wasn't it? If I look in it.
Yeah, it
So
was
technical product marketing manager.
yes, correct.
Take me through the thought process there. Was it a conscious decision to move to the US, or look at a different type of role so you could learn and grow? Or was there an opportunity that occurred through networking? Or take me through that process.
Yeah, it's a good one. Again, I think, as I said, Microsoft gives you so many different opportunities. And and also like George, you have been a PFE, so you know that the level of depth we can go to and try different things is phenomenal, right? So I think there are times when I was working on like Azure database, SQL databases, before even kind of doing Ranger, right? There are a lot of times that you interact with product group at the Redmond office, right? So you're like, let's say something's not working, or you want really that to be enhanced for the customer. So there's always this constant communication, and certain times, you'll end up making impact that, everybody wants to see in their product. So you kind of build relationships that way, and people want to like, hey, why don't you consider coming over or try, something here in the US, whatever you're doing there. So then, well, while going through that journey, so first you make relationships and you start making an impact, which is great, right? So I think every time when you're doing a job, I think the whole thing is how can I do my best, right? And so that people remember you for that, or at least your customers feel valued. So I think when that happens, and if you're looking for the next opportunity, there's always somebody who's saying, you know what, come over, you should try something like that. But I think the Ranger thing, I would probably say, it was because of Callan. Callan was like, DJ, I think there is something really massive that we could do with your expertise. And I'm just setting his name because I think Azure Ranger wouldn't have happened, at least to me, if it was not for Cal. And he was like, dude, this is gonna be great because you have the passion. You can do like a lot of the things that goes along with SQL Server and SQL databases, and you have been doing Azure a lot, I think you'll do a good job. And then literally went through the process, became the one of the first to kind of do this, and the impact's been great. I think we did a great job, and certainly people like you came on board or others in the APAC, just massive impact, both from a revenue perspective and also from how we took Azure from like zero to hero in
Mm.
literally like months or maybe a year, right? But that impact, when you have that level of impact and everybody's aware of it, certainly there is always the next part to it. Like, okay, now that I'm done with this, I'm done with PFE, what's next? And then
Yeah.
I always want to do something more techno functional, not like go too heavy on the engineering side or very deep into the product, but something where I can bring all that I learned, which is like building demos, showing that, being a PFE, be able to troubleshoot, be technical enough, but at the same time able to articulate the value. And God's grace, at the same time, Microsoft was coming up with this tech product marketing role. These are very interesting roles which they carved. Think of having a technical expert in the marketing team, right? Who can build demos, who can actually write a lot of level 400 sort of content, level
Mhm.
300 level content, enable field and sales, and have the way to kind of go and talk at different conferences, at events, but hold that entire technical narrative very strongly. I work with product, work with engineering, and it's a very very specific role that was carved. Certainly, I think if I have to say, I think Satya Nadella was a tech product marketer, if I'm not wrong. So these roles have been there at different times, but I think this was coming up in the Azure SQL databases and Azure Data Services team. So I landed up becoming a tech product marketer in the Azure Data Services, and my focus was Azure SQL Database, which is a pretty big business today.
Mm.
Azure Document DB, which we call it Azure Cosmos DB today.
Mm.
Azure Search, which is called Cognitive Search. So, like these were my three top priority on the product side that I picked up when I became a tech product marketer in Redmond. Interesting journey
Cool.
because all the learnings, all the feedback, all the
Yeah.
working product, you get to know people, you get to go through these loops of interview learnings and then cracking it. And again, thanks to Microsoft for being open to take people from one country to another because of their expertise and experiences and supporting the journey.
So networking being a key part of that again. Very
Important.
common. Super common. It's funny. Almost every single interview I do, we talk about it when people ask me about their career. Networking is just such an important part of building out your career, and it's not just necessarily about choosing the role, right? It's about you don't know what opportunity might come up. You
Absolutely.
just have no idea. That's cool, man, and I love that. And again, I don't think I need to ask the why. It sounds like you're so adventurous, that opportunity to move to the US, and then the world's almost your oyster once you're in Redmond. There's so many opportunities there.
Right.
So then you're at, okay, I'm just going through your LinkedIn profile again. So you're at Microsoft for a little while longer, post that for a couple of years, doing a few different roles. There was the App Innovation, Data and AI for Devs, and then also Microsoft AI Artificial Intelligence, Senior Manager of Product and Marketing. So similar types of roles before you moved on to, I think it was AWS
That's right.
initially. Did you find over the next couple of years when you were in Redmond that you picked up different sets of skills in that marketing manager role to build onto what you did before you started looking at other opportunities outside of Microsoft?
Yeah, it's a good one. Certainly. I mean, so when you pick up a role like, let's say, the tech product marketer for myself, certainly I went deeper into the role, understood what this needs to kind of deliver from a value perspective to the organization, but to the customers as well. So yeah, you're right. So I think basically when I became a technical product marketer, the whole thing was to go deeper, learn the role. Kind of there's so much to deliver on, and then certainly once that started happening, you want to learn more about, okay, what is beyond this. And then for every tech product marketer, there was a core product marketer. So they would actually own the messaging, the positioning for the product. So I certainly did three different products, but then as soon as I moved to the next one, I started also learning a lot more about, okay, a product marketer's bigger role certainly is to hold the messaging and the positioning, how you want to show the product to the market. So whether you want to call a Cosmos DB a globally distributed databases. Why? Because certainly you could do read writes in every replica, or similarly, it all depends on who your target audience is, and then eventually how you kind of go and position the product to them. And then while positioning, how do you message the product? Which means what is the value proposition of the product? So these are very different way of bringing your skills and taking that to the market in a way that the product can be adopted And then certainly that eventually makes customers more successful. So I started getting closer and closer to product marketing, which eventually was the key when I moved to AWS, kind of more AWS AI and machine learning product marketing. Certainly these were critical to be successful there.
And you were at AWS for about a year and a half doing, as you said, the marketing role in AWS AI. And then since then, you've taken on a number of, correct me if I'm right, I don't know if they're all startups, but they all look like really challenging, what I would say, very challenging roles at some of the tech startups. So you're at Neo4j, Yellow.ai. What do you think the key differences for you were coming from primarily some of these very large corporations to more smaller startup, probably more likely faster paced industry? How did you find that? What was the major challenge for you? And then was that a reason why you decided to move over into that space?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because what I did at Microsoft with these products that were like P2s, like, not, let's say, the high priority products, but then they needed a lot of that initial build up, narrative writing, taking the product out. I think it's just what a startup would do as well. So you move fast, you kind of do a lot of validation, even though it's not like completely ready for the market, but you have to start showing the product. So actually, I would say starting at Microsoft, taking up a lot of these specific roles around some of the products that were like literally at P2, but going all the way to P0 helped to kind of bring that aspect of moving fast and get realizing the value quickly. But certainly when I moved to AWS does work very strongly on a culture that is, getting things done sooner, right? And they have very high quality bar for what you put out there, heavily customer obsessed, but also at the same time, if you have an idea, you work through it, you take the word out. So the culture for some of the teams, at least I worked on at AWS, was very startup-y. So that's where I realized that if you want to move fast, this is the type of thing that you want to do. So eventually, when I was presented with a startup opportunity, for it, I was like, okay, I think I want to do this because I want to get things out quickly to the market, get quick validation, learn quickly from it, because in a startup world you are not, let's say, going through a number of different enterprise level reviews, right? You're here kind of putting it out there the day one you want to, and quickly getting the feedback, which actually makes your product better every single day. And that's something I love. Want to be a fighter jet, I always want to move at a fast speed to get the feedback that's really required for us to make a product better for our customers. I think startups gives me that sort of kick. Every single day is a new thing that you're doing, and how fast you go take this to the market, validate, get results is just phenomenal. And that just makes me extremely happy. And I feel that I'm super lucky and also blessed that I get to work with some of the smartest minds in the industry. Because if you're working with the CEO of a company who built, let's say, graph database like ML, or if you get to work with Raghu, who actually built Yellow.ai, it's like a conversational AI platform, such sharp minds, you learn from them on a daily basis. And getting access to that is phenomenal, right? You become a very different person. You think like a CEO. You think, how can I make my customers not only happy, but also how do I solve these very complex AI specific problems more from writing and building a solution, right?
Yeah.
Because AI could be such that you're just talking about it, but then building a solution on top of it is phenomenal. So that access to the talent, to the CEOs, to the masterminds who build these products is just amazing when you're in startup. And pace of learning, pace of failure is equally great. So you fail fast, you learn fast, you move fast. I think that's the key being in startup, and I think I want to be in startup as long as I can.
Sounds cool, mate. It also sounds like that would ensure the passion that you've got for analytics as well. The analysis side, get it out there. What's working, what's not working, how do we tweak it, how do we make it? Yeah, it's interesting hearing all the different skill sets that you've built up over the years. They're sort of converging into what you tend to do today. That's cool, mate.
Sure.
Take me. So one of the fewer questions I ask every single person that comes on this show. I personally have a main career philosophy or set of values. So they are helping people. I need a purpose, and I have to have passion for what I'm doing. They're the three main areas that I tend to follow, irrelevant of what I do in my career. Have you got a set of values that you've tended to follow throughout your career?
Indeed, I think, we all kind of, live and breathe values. And I think for me, being transparent is very important, because if you're not transparent, you can't communicate what you're really feeling. And because I certainly manage teams, I have to be open and honest about it. So and you can only do so if you're transparent enough. Whatever it is, good, bad, worse, I think, if you're mincing your words, not giving the right picture, I think nobody gets value out of it. So being transparent is very important. Second, I think being empathetic is extremely, extremely important in this day and life when we're moving fast, trying to get things done. The last thing you want or you want to do to your team, your people is just, kind of asking them, what the hell are you doing? Or, why this is not done, especially when they are sick, when they really need some time for themselves. So while you are moving with pace, I think empathy remains your key value. Should be. I mean, at least for me, it is. And I hope others can follow, because if you're empathetic, half of the battle is won, because then you can understand what others are going through. And that makes you more of a human while executing at the pace you want to. It's a very difficult thing to kind of get to in terms of combination, but once it happens, it's just phenomenal. Those two, transparency, being empathetic, and I think have ton of passion. That's one of the values that I think I would always have with me is no matter what you do, no matter what you do and how you do it, you have to be passionate about it. If you're not feeling the passion, go find another job or do something else where your passion lies. But being true to yourself and being passionate will take you a long way. So yeah, I would say that's the third one if I have to call out. But those three at least I take to work every single day. I live and breathe that, and I hope I can continue and not fall apart.
Good values to have, mate. All right, give me the highlight of your career and the low light of your career.
That's an interesting one. Highlight of my career. I still feel that the impact that we drove during the Azure Ranger program, and with just few people, and literally closing multi-million in literally closed revenue end of a year, right? It just shows how much somebody can achieve, right? If done in the right way. So I feel that the impact was phenomenal. I have not seen that level of impact. Like even now, I feel that that's probably one of the best things that I ever did. So I feel that was the highlight for sure. From a perspective of low light, well, I think sometimes you're stuck in situations which you don't want to be in, not because you were at fault. It's just that sometimes circumstances come heavily on you. I think once it did happen for a very simple confusion with some basic, you know, um, reporting or something, where, somebody would question, like, what do you mean by this? And it actually impacted, let's say, a customer. It's a fault. But then again, you don't want to be in that situation. It's a good learning, and I feel everybody should have ton of learning. I feel that when you keep the standards and bar very high and you get into situations like this, it kind of makes you feel more vulnerable, which is also okay. But I feel I had an incident like that, and I felt I was probably low light because I always felt that I've set the bar so high for myself that it shouldn't have happened. End of the day, everything was easy, it was solved, but those 5 or 6 days that I had to go through to kind of rectify the mistake and everything else was kind of nightmarish. So, but yeah, I would just go with those two as probably the top two.
Always good learning, though, right? Everything's always a good learning too. Okay, let's take you back to when you were a child again. What piece of advice would you give young TJ or any young students or people starting to want to work, get into a corporate career or work at one of these large companies or work at a startup? What advice would you give somebody who's starting their journey or just about to come to the pointy end of schooling before they start a corporate career?
Today, as of today, if they have to.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, well, I think as of today, I would say, being in the AI and machine learning field for last 7, 8 odd years, and where things have been now, especially with agentic AI, Gen AI, with MCP, A2A, and whatnot. I think that world has completely changed overnight, right? And everybody could be an entrepreneur, right, overnight today as well. If you're just focusing in the right thing, if you have a great idea, like people call it vibe coding, right? So if you have a great idea, it's just about asking a tool like Replit or Cursor to kind of go write the code for you. So while it's great that kids of today want to go and maybe work for big companies, which is equally exciting, and they should. But I would suggest that if you have the opportunity to be an entrepreneur, if you have a great idea, this is the time to do so. I would rather say to anybody who's listening in, youngster or even like somebody thinking about venturing into AI, machine learning, I think if you're doing so, think about being an entrepreneur, getting your idea to life. That way you can not only just kind of, make an impact to users and people in the world, but also kind of feel extremely proud about that you could build something on your own, right, which has value to people in their life. And certainly, not saying nobody should go work for anybody, but I think at this time of where things are, people should definitely go and try something new and take the entrepreneurship as a possibility. Yeah, if they have an option.
Cool, mate. It's good advice. All right, DJ, thank you so much for joining us on the show, mate. Really appreciate it. And it's great seeing you again after all these years as well.
It's a pleasure, George. You're doing something really fun. I think, I don't know what you're calling it, Sympa Says, and George, it's really fun. I had no clue how this is going to turn out, but believe it's been fun and so good to see you. You are amazing
You
as a
too, mate.
human. You are a wonderful person, and
Thanks,
equally
mate.
a very strong, tech savvy engineer person, now a trainer. I know you're doing too many things, but the best part about you is like always with a smile, always helping people out, and I think that just makes you so special, George. So stay
Thanks, mate. The check's in the mail for those compliments. Appreciate it. It's all. Thank you. That's very lovely of you to say, mate. Thank you very
you
much.
deserve all the praises. You're awesome.
All right. Thanks again, TJ. And for everyone else, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you at the next one. See ya.
See ya.
Thank you for watching this episode of Sympa Says. If you would like to see more videos, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Or follow if you are listening on a podcast platform to support the channel and join our community.